Hello again. I hope you enjoyed that video on Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, one of the great decision-making models of all time. But again, it has those drawbacks that it can only be used when you have two clear and discrete choices, and it can also have those career limiting side effects that you might want to avoid. A much better model for making decisions is one that I've developed over the past decade and a half based on a lot of reading and research that I've done and a lot of thinking and teaching other people about how to make effective decisions. And it's called the FUTR Model. And there are three things I'd like you to know about the FUTR Model right up front. Number one, all decisions that we're going to make are about the future. And so it seems appropriate to have a model that follows that title. Number two, you can see the FUTR Model is you can see on this slide the outlines of an envelope. And I like to think about the FUTR Model as a back of the envelope model, where if you have 5 minutes to make a decision, or if you have 5 months to make a decision, you can very quickly identify the most relevant factors for the decision that you've got to make and try to get some clarity around both what you know, what you don't know, and what you think might happen. And third, the FUTR Model is about clarity. It's not a function machine where you put in a problem at the beginning and you mechanically work through the steps and all of a sudden you have the right decision. It's a clarifying model, one that helps you see the issues more clearly, understand where your gaps are, and understand what might happen in the future and where your assumptions are and where you ought to spend your time researching. So the FUTR Model has 4 elements. First are facts. Second are unknowns. Third are theories. And fourth are risks. And those are the 4 elements of the FUTR Model. And in this video, we're going to talk about the first 2, and then we're going to talk about the other 2 in ensuing videos. So the Oxford English Dictionary, that venerable source of language, of meaning in the English language, defines a fact as a thing that has really occurred or is actually the case. So facts are objectively verifiable elements of a decision. They might be things, they might be opinions, we'll talk about that, but these are things that really are the case. So what are the facts that you really want to think about? Well, the first facts are the facts about the decision. So I was teaching about this model early on, and we invited each person to think about a decision that they were facing, and we would then put it through the model. And I said to the class, okay, what are the facts of your decision? And one individual raised his hand and said, our decision is whether or not we should buy a new car. We're at the end of our MBA program, we have a job, our car, we're not sure about it, and we're wondering whether we should buy a new car now or whether we should just continue driving what we have. So I said, all right, so let's begin. What are the facts? And the first fact, he said, was, well, our car is old. At which point, several other members in the class rolled their eyes and raised their hand in objection and said, that's not a fact. Because in reality, the statement, our car is old, is a value judgment about a car. Well, what are the facts about the car? Well, it has 95,000 miles on it. Well, is 95,000 miles an old car? Depending on the year, make, and model of the car, it might still be under the original manufacturer's warranty. In this case, it was not. But so he listed off other relevant facts. Car had 95,000 miles. Car had been in for repairs 3 times in the previous 4 months for particular things that had happened. And he could actually rattle off objectively verifiable events. And the reason it's important to get the facts right is because if you begin with the premise that our car is old, you know where you're going to end up, and that's buying a new car. That's a very, very different starting place than our car has 95,000 miles. So you want to lay out what you really know about the decision. These are objectively verifiable facts and elements. Secondly, and very critically, you want to lay out facts about you, facts about your opinion, facts about your values, facts about your preferences. So Peter Drucker, the 20th century management guru, talked a lot about good decision making, and he noted that the executives who were the best decision makers began their decision by treating as a fact their opinion. Not that their opinion was correct, but they treated it as a fact that they had an opinion, that they had a preference. And with that on the table and on paper, it could now be dealt with in a much more objective and scientific way. Because remember, what many of you learned as you did the first portfolio assignment was that you all had front runners. Many of you had a decision that you wanted to make, but you weren't willing to admit it, but it guided your entire process. So what you ought to do is just admit it right up front and get that out of the way. So those are the two key things that you want to list in that very first column. Facts about the decision and facts about your personal issues around the decision, your opinions, your values, your preferences. And what you'll find for the average decision is that list won't be all that long, maybe 6 or 7 different bullet points that you might know and understand. Then you go to the second column, which is unknown. And again, looking at our venerable Oxford English Dictionary, an unknown, rather surprisingly, is a thing that's not known. So what goes in the unknown column? Things that you don't know about the decision and about yourself. So for example, some things you might not know about a decision about where to live, what house to buy, or where to rent in the town that you're going to be moving to. What are the schools like? What are police and fire protection like? What are the neighbors like? What kinds of amenities are around there? How long are commutes? These are all sort of unknowns that typically you're not really sure about. And you also want to sort of list unknowns about yourself. Maybe how long we intend to live there may be uncertain. Or what do we really want? We're not sure if we want to buy or rent. We're not sure if we want a new build or if we want an older house that we can remodel. There are many unknowns about both the decision and about you that you want to take into account. Now, these first two columns are crucial because what we all want to do is we all want to make decisions based on the facts. So what do we do once we put something in the fact column? Well, we do nothing about it. We just forget about it. Why? Because it's a fact. It's not going to change. For my previous student, running out in the midst of the evening to wonder what does the odometer say, it will still read 95,000 miles. That's not going to change. So don't spend much time verifying facts or going back over and over them again. It's comforting, makes us feel good because it's the certainty that we so desire, but it isn't helpful. When you get to the column of unknowns, what you'll soon realize is the things that you don't know about the decision vastly exceed the things that you do know about the decision. And that is emotionally discomforting and disquieting and makes us wonder what to do. The unknown list, if the fact list is a half a dozen, the unknowns might be 24. What we're going to want to do with those unknowns is we're going to want to do research. These are things where it's worth spending our effort to collect data, to gather information, and to try to move those unknowns into the fact column if we can. But the number of unknowns makes that practically impossible. So we have to figure out a way to cull out the unknowns that we are unaware of and figure out how to deal with the ones that are most important. And there's a little tool called the Eisenhower matrix or the Covey 4 quadrants matrix to think about how to go about our understanding the unknowns in a way that's reasonable and that we can decide which ones to focus on. So you take this 4-quadrant model and you think about, are these things that I need to know now? How urgent are they? How immediate is it that I know this? So if I have a 4-year-old child and I'm moving into a new neighborhood, understanding the quality of the public school system is pretty important to know now, because in 6 or 8 short months, my child is going to be entering kindergarten, and I really want to know about the quality of the schools. If in fact I'm a young newly married couple with no children, or perhaps a single newborn infant, I may really care a lot about the schools, but it may not be particularly urgent. So for each of your unknowns that you have on that list, you want to go through and ask yourself, do I need to know this now? Is this an urgent item of information that I really need to focus on? So you might make a red check mark, or you might make a green check mark, or something about ones that fall into the yes category and ones that fall into the no category. And then the other dimension that you want to think about is, how central is this particular unknown for my life goals and objectives? How do I know what really, really matters? And the only way you know this is by having a mission statement, is by having a clear sense of what your life is all about and where you want to take it. So it might be rather central to your life that you understand what kind of outdoor recreation opportunities exist in the neighborhood or in the area in which you're going to live, because you've defined a core part of your purpose and meaning as spending time in the great outdoors. For many people, knowing where the church is located, or understanding the structure and nature of some of the wards in which you might be living, proves to be very, very central, because membership in the church and the kinds of people that you interact with in the church are pretty central to your sense of meaning and purpose in life. So you then want to go through your list of unknowns and you want to figure out which ones are the most central to my or my family's sense of meaning and sense of purpose. And then you have the fundamental way to cull out your list of unknowns and figure out where you're going to spend the greatest amount of effort. So clearly, you're going to spend time and energy and effort trying to figure out, what are the things that I need to know now? What are those urgent, critical items that I really have to figure out to make a good decision? And I'm going to sure focus on things that are both urgent and central. So if raising educated children is a value of yours, and I certainly hope it is, then that's pretty central and it's pretty critical if you've got school-age kids to figure that one out. So you know that that's an area where you're going to spend a lot of research time and a lot of energy trying to take those unknowns and move them into the fact column. Although this other column here, things that are central to my life but not necessarily urgent, I also really want to focus on those two, on that quadrant. That's what Stephen Covey refers to as quadrant 2, things that are vitally important to us but aren't urgent. These are the things, the elements of a decision that we often leave out because we're so concerned about quadrant 1, or the things that are urgent and critical to know and central to our life, that we often forget about quadrant 2 because we get so hung up in urgency. But remember, it's as important or more important to deal with things that are central to your life, but that you might not be critical. So for example, you might be moving across the country, or you might have a choice of different locations, one of which might be close to parents and one which might not be close to parents. It may not be urgent now that you're close to your parents, but think about as your parents age, What kind of obligations might you have to them? And if it doesn't matter where you live now, it might think about a trajectory of where you're going to live down the road. And that's some additional insight to a decision about where to live that's highly valuable. Now notice that you will find no check marks in the following two boxes. What's important, what's not important but yet urgent, and what's not important and not urgent. Now that fourth box, where it's not urgent and not central to your life, that's pretty self-explanatory, but it's amazing how much time we spend in what Covey calls quadrant 4, meandering around in things that aren't really urgent to know and aren't really central. And oftentimes we'll simply pick up that information because it's easy, or because it happens to be convenient, or it happens to make us feel good, but won't influence the decision that we're going to make. Now, the real trick is getting rid of what Covey calls quadrant 3, things that are urgent that we really would like to know. So we really would like to know, for example, how many ethnic restaurants there are in the town in which we live, but is that central to our sense of meaning? Is that one of the ways in which we define ourselves and we define our happiness? It might turn out to be no. That's the so-called icing on the cake. And what we have to do is be willing to forego that quadrant to focus our time and our energy on those upper two quadrants, things that are urgent and important, and things that are important and not urgent. So the final step of going through the unknown column is to go through and cross out every unknown that doesn't fit either quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. That should cull your list significantly and substantially, because you can think of all sorts of things that you don't really know that might be interesting or might be useful, but are certainly tangential and not central to your decision. So this is where you spend your time and energy researching. This is where you try to figure it out, because your goal is as many of those unknowns as you can to move over into the fact column, so that these are objectively verifiable things that you can know and you can be certain about. But there will be a number of unknowns that are irresolvable, that you will not be able to figure out. And for those, you have to move on to column 3, and that's going to be the topic of the next video that you're going to watch, about how do you deal with unknowns that you can't resolve into facts. So we'll see you in the next installment. Thank you.